It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. It's Feedback Friday. And some good news this Feedback Friday, the ongoing saga of the commenter that called me matronly. Long story short, and I'm not gonna get into too many details because I don't know if the guy wants me to get into details, but the guy did apologize, and he actually did a really nice thing that I don't know if he wants credit for. So all's well that ends well. Dialogue can sometimes work, and that is awesome. More on that in a bit. If you want to continue, good work sounds so but help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. Patrons are gonna get some perks, more on that in a second, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Leanna Cares has been so many people, so much success, so much good things happening, but combining all this together, Thursday, May 5th, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, a show called It's Not Therapy that I'm hosting based on Wellness Wednesday, Leanna Cares, all that stuff, is going to be premiering on Saga 960 AM in Mississauga. You can listen to it online via stream or podcast format. That information will be coming next week when I get the details. There's like a listen live button on the Saga 960 website. I will add it to my description box so you guys can participate. But it's a combination questions, interviews, ongoing thing. And the first episode is going to be about social stresses, stress in social situations. More on that next week. So, the whole thing with Manly Mondays made me realize that we need a bit more structure. You know, I don't like a lot of rules, libertarian tendencies. But I do think we need some understanding of what Manly Mondays is and what it's not based on some of the feedback. I do not want to get bogged down in the manosphere thing, the men's rights activist versus feminism thing. And I needed some time based on the comments to figure out how to explain where I am coming from on this. And I realized it's because if anybody's seen my videos in the past, I don't subscribe to the theory that white upper middle class and up women are an oppressed group. Therefore, I don't believe that white upper middle class men and up are an oppressed group. I am equal in that regard. So the minute people start going on about the oppression of rich white people, I'm just like, oh, I just, money buys a lot, okay? And I'm being reductive here, but I'm just explaining why I don't want to get into the class warfare. Whenever you start talking about this and that and the system and society, my highly systemized brain just rebels against arguments of definition. I dislike it. And we are not going to solve the ills of society in a YouTube video. What I'm trying to do is give individual viewers a way to overcome some pretty intense social messaging and be happier, more productive, more fulfilled individuals. That's all I can do. I don't see any point in getting into the culture war fight. I stepped away with that with women's issues. I don't want to make the same mistake with men's issues. I help and support the people I can help and support. I believe very strongly in staying in my lane and giving people who want to have better little things that can help them have that, right? I am not a lawyer. I can't change laws. I am not a politician. Um, I can't change laws, right? And we can fight till the cows come home on cherry pick statistics about, for instance, the whole child custody thing and how Republican states actually have a larger child custody gap than Democratic or purple states. The lowest child custody gap is actually in swing states. But Republican states in the US are the absolute worst. And there are reasons for that. If anybody cares, the reason is that Republican states like punitive divorce laws. So they want to do everything they can to force a miserable couple to stay married. And that includes um, uh, punitive financial laws, but also the whole custody thing. There's always, with anything, if you look deep down with this stuff, it's like I was saying with the "Is Feminism a Useful Term" video, there's always another side whenever you look at just, one part of the gender binary or the other. There are offsets. It doesn't matter which issue you're talking about. There are offsets for every single thing. And it's like a glass is half empty, glass is half full, or, the Yoruban myth where Alegba, Papa Legba in Louisiana, goes walking through a town, and Alegba has the black clothes on one side and the red clothes on the other, and he walks through town and everybody's going, his clothes are black, his clothes are red, and they start fighting, and the minute it hits a fever pitch, Alegba turns around. Alegba is the trickster god of Yoruba myth. I love that story because to me that's the culture war. People are just fighting based on their side of the line, and they're completely neglecting any data from the other side that indicates the issue is more nuanced and less simple than they think. And so I'm making it very clear now, I am not interested. I was not interested back in the day when people from those groups tried to smear me. And I try to be very careful with the MRA, MRA and the radical feminist sides of these things, because I am acutely aware. This is my own work. This is my own my shit right now. I have had some ridiculously terrible experiences with both of those extremes. And I don't want to have emotional knee jerks to those. And that's part of the reason I just don't bother. The other part of it is I don't think anyone's being persuaded by that fight. That's why I take an individual approach, one person at a time. I'm interested. And I said this from the beginning and people don't seem to understand it. It's about how a person views the world. It's the narratives people tell themselves about their own experiences. And I don't subscribe to any narrative that tells someone that everything is just hopeless. Because what does that do? It persuades people to not try, to not even take the chance, to just be depressed and beaten down the whole time. And to me, if you believe there is some grand conspiracy against X group, isn't that doing that conspiracy's work for them? Isn't telling people you don't have a chance, you don't have a hope in hell, just feeding the thing you claim to oppose? That's the way I see it. I don't want to be fatalistic. I want to give people hope. I want to... Because I know for me, I spent a lot of years going, there's no way. I spent a lot of years being absolutely terrified. It took being canceled 4 friggin' times for me to realize, no, there's only so much these people can do to you. And you can carry on. And yes, they do have power. Yes, they do have influence. But it's not complete. Right? It's not, they're not omnipotent. They're not all powerful. You can, you can run between the raindrops of this thing. And the fact that I'm still here, the fact that I'm still doing relatively okay is testament to that. So why would I get down in the muck with people who want to destroy me? That, again, that's doing their work for them, and I have no interest in that. Now, pivoting from that to games, there is a thoroughfare here. I find it interesting that the really core game design stuff is working way better now than it did when I tried it a few years ago. A few years ago, there was like no appetite for game design stuff. And I don't know if that's because I'm like game dev hat now. I have more cred on the issue, or people just want to talk about it more now. But it's really good discussion. And this is an example of, just because something doesn't work the first time you try it doesn't mean it's not worth revisiting down the road, because things change, right? And the discussion, I appreciated the nuance. It became sort of a pivot on the idea of big and about open world games. Are they just too big? And it became, well, is it too big, or is it not enough content, too empty? And it's like, all right, fair, kind of two ways of, again, just different perspectives on the same, different lens, different position on the same basic idea. Are they making these massive environments with not enough to do in them? And then some people brought up the quality issue. And to me, as somebody who's designed games and has scope is this thing. There are two things about game dev that will trip you up every time: not managing scope and not managing your design directives. And the two things are linked. I had this absolutely lovely conversation with someone about purpose in design, and the importance of remembering the purpose of what you're making. Because, Cyberpunk 2077, BioShock Infinite, before, what's his name, Rod Ferguson got in and put out the fires at the last minute. They're shining examples of games that we want to make it good. What's good? Well, good. Throw in all these things. It's good. And it ends up just being all over the place. It is not enough to muck around for a couple years and then go, okay, what kind of game do we have here? You have to have intentions from the beginning of what exactly are we doing here? What are we trying to make? And Ghost of Tsushima is an example of a game with an extremely clear design vision. We are going to make an interactive Kurosawa movie with sort of a more modern sensibility. That is exactly what they set out to do. That is exactly what they did. And to me, that is why that game works. All the side missions, everything about that game is so intentional regarding that design directive, as opposed to these massive games that just seem, well, we want it to be big and we want it to be pretty. And I understand why PlayStation wants show pony games to sell systems. They're doing really well in this console cycle with the success of the PS5 is the success of PlayStation first-party IP. I say this all the time. Specs don't sell systems because the average person doesn't know what it means. They quote it, but they don't know what it means. What sells a system, the choice someone makes in what console to buy, if any of them, is what experiences you can have. So people are buying PlayStations for, first of all, to play with their friends on whatever multiplayer games they play. But also they're buying for Spider-Man. They're buying for Ghost of Tsushima. They're buying for, as much as I don't like it, The Last of Us. Well, The Last of Us 2. God of War. Ratchet and Clank. Less so now. But, and that's why I think PlayStation should just be bringing back franchises like Sly Cooper and things like that. It's time for a new Sly Cooper game. But those experiences are what moves systems. And those experiences, again, are emotional. And that's why I don't understand why I appreciate creator autonomy as a creator. But creator autonomy can exist alongside project management, right? Make any game you want as long as you're on this budget, on this timeline, within reason. If the God of War games can hit budget, it can stay on budget and hit their timelines, anybody can. You know, it's not the shit Naughty Dog gets away with is just inexcusable with their overruns and their lateness. Enough already. But Horizon, it might be a COVID game. That might be part of the issue. But I think they also felt pressure to be a showpiece for the processing power and the extra ability of the PlayStation. And yes, the fast travel does do that. Some of the haptic feedback does do that. But the average person isn't going to give a shit if they're bored by the side missions. Now, the average person will probably just blow through the campaign. But there's still this sense of missed opportunity that I don't feel with definitely Ghost of Tsushima was excellent, but even something like Resident Evil Village that was incredibly short. The longer I get away from that game, the more fond I am of the experience. I felt like I really overpaid for that game when it first released. I'll forgive them if they, and they won't. They'll make me pay for it, but drop free DLC. There is a point where more is just more. And the interesting thing is that the comments are really divided on Red Dead Redemption 2. Whether that game worked as too big or that game was great as big as it was. And I have never been a fan of Rockstar's open world sandbox design stuff. I'm not a Bethesda open world game fan either. Fallout, it's game to game, but New Vegas was my favorite, which was Obsidian. I didn't love Skyrim. I was bored through large portions of it. And that was the one that started me really thinking about like open world stuff. As flawed as the Far Cry games are in places, they make moving from place to place fun. Just exploring the world is fun. And some of that I can explain rationally. I can put tangible details on it. Some of it is just a feeling, and I recognize that is very subjective. And this is where we get in the no game is for everyone. Except apparently The Witcher 3. Like everybody who plays that game seems to really like that game. And this is where we get into the segging back into the reason I do a lot of mental health and wellness stuff on a channel that started as a gaming channel. Because games are an escape for a lot of people. Games are validation. Games, because they're interactive, have a real power to make someone feel accepted and understood without pesky other people getting in the way. It really is a safe break from a world that feels extremely cruel right now. And right now, I feel like I can do the most good. Yes, doing some gaming topics, but talking about these personal validation stuff. There's, somebody said on Twitter, because I said something about these people come at me like a ton of bricks saying society doesn't care. Well, if you don't think society cares, why do you expect me to care? And someone responded, then why do you pretend to care? It's not that I pretend to care. I do care. It's just I don't know where to begin with someone who has convinced themselves that either nobody cares or society doesn't care. And I get where that comes from. I get the fear. I get the overdeveloped sense of, thank you, computer, overdeveloped sense of needing to protect oneself. And that narrative, it's not about your feelings, is okay in the short term. I do it when I'm going into a corporate environment, when I'm going, when something is results driven, when I'm going in with a bunch of people I know can't stand me, who hate my guts, would not piss on me if I was on fire, unless it would make the fire hurt more. I say, nobody in there cares about you. But I go out of that environment and I have friends who care about me. So I'm not tearing apart my insides with that constant messaging. It's short term. It's purpose built. And that's the difference. It's one thing to feel, because when someone says nobody cares, or when someone says society doesn't care, what they're actually saying is they don't feel cared about by the people around them, because no one can perceive all of society, right? We can only perceive our corner of it. And gaming has a unique power to help people, especially introverted people, find their people, right? Find acceptance somewhere. First, because, you can talk to people all over the world. You have an automatic common interest. And, if you do multiplayer, it's a common activity as well. And, accomplishing goals in a game, you can get to know each other, so on and so forth. It's structure. And the thing is, that's not even going to work. People are never going to feel accepted if they don't believe it's possible. People are never going to feel cared about if they don't believe it's possible. And y'all can fight me all you want about that. It's just fact. If you're not open to a possibility, you're not going to be able to see it when it's right in front of you. And I see that a lot. I see people missing the good because they're so hyper-focused on the bad. And I get that that's the way our brains are wired. But we know that's the way our brains are wired. And so we can tell ourselves, for most people, and people disagree with me on this, and not everybody's like this, but for a lot of people, they focus on the negatives, so the negatives become strongest. Other people are too optimistic, but with what I've seen in gaming, it's more the negative stuff. It's people who have only been given permission their whole life to be one thing, and everything has been grades, and be smart, be a human, a human wiki. It used to be a human encyclopedia when, I was in school, but now nobody knows what an encyclopedia is. Be a human font of information, not a human. And then unfortunately, when you get out of school and out of grades and then get into the world, the reality is that no one really likes the smartest person in the room. That's just, people may fight me on that, but it's true. Nobody likes the person who acts like they have all the answers and is looking down their noses or seems to be looking down their noses at everyone. And, well, you don't know as much as I do, because a lot of the stuff that you end up encountering in the world is highly subjective and does have multiple valid perspectives. And when you get into these fights about there can only be one right answer, it's now Thunderdome of the marketplace of ideas. Instead of going, all right, your experience is valid, and so's yours. You know what? And so's yours. But you know what? Only talk about your experience. Don't extrapolate to a point that you can't prove. Stay in an area that no one can say you did not have your experience. The time that people can argue with you is when you extrapolate to say this is a universal constant throughout society, throughout the world. Because here's the thing. The world is not a single society. And no matter what social example you provide to prove your hyperbolic reductive heuristic, somebody's going to be able to pull out an exception. And that's fair. Because you don't need, you will get better results saying, this is my experience, because your experience is valid, than you'll get making a society thing. Because what is society but a collection of people with certain, and after that, it becomes very muddy because you do believe in social contract theory. Do you believe in what? How do you structure society? How do you define society? I don't care. For the purposes of what I do not care. I do media analysis and individual coaching. That's all I do. I took anthropology. I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a politician. I'm not a civics major. There are other people you can have that fight with. That is not where my interests lie. Again. So let's, this was a good week to me whenever something starts in a really nasty place and ends up in a kind, validating place. I'm happy. And how did that happen? I saw the pain through someone's anger and someone's aggression. And even though I set a boundary and said, no, I will not let you do this to me, I saw that person was hurting and I validated that hurt. And then the person took a step towards me, figuratively, right? And that's how it's done. That is how it's done. That's the only way it's done. And that takes everyone involved being willing to make those, offering a hand out, right? It's the equalizer, the modern equalizer with Queen Latifah said, let's get rid of call out culture and replace it with call in culture. Let's bring people in and stick to individual experiences and try to understand each other's experiences and not talk about these undefinable, unprovable, boundaryless concepts like society, right? What do you think? Remember, radio show next week. More on that next week. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. Or become, become buy a Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Happy Friday. Have a great weekend.